Hi there and welcome to another PSD Tuts Plus spoon-fed Photoshop tutorial. I'm Gavin Steele, and in today's tutorial I'm going to take you through how to create a rusty texture in Photoshop. The original tutorial by Sergio is over at the site psdtutsplus.com, and you can see our final image here. We're going to go from this photograph to this rusty little vent here, and if we just scroll down a little bit further you can see where he's got his inspiration from and how he's used similar effects on some of his illustrative work. So that looks really cool. So we're going to take you through all of these steps and make sure you end up with something that looks pretty similar to this. So load up Photoshop. Here you can see our finished item here. I'm just going to minimize that down out of the way. And here I have the file itself. So if you're a PSD Plus member, you can just download the file, play around with it, hack it apart, and you'll find this original image in there too. So the first thing we need to do is we're going to duplicate that layer. So Command J in Photoshop. I'm going to hide my original, and then I'm going to hit Command T, and that's going to let me free transform the shape. Right click inside of the shape, and we're going to go to Distort. Now as we're doing that, I'm just going to bring in a horizontal line over on the left, and we're going to use that to line up this left hand side. First thing I'm going to do with our shape is I'm just going to shrink it down. Let me just come off that. Just going to scale it down just a little bit, and then I'm going to go back onto my Distort. Okay, so it's pretty straight there, but you can just see it's just angling off to the left hand side. So I'm going to bring on another angle over here, and I'm just going to start to bring this shape out. I'm going to bring one down from the top, and again just going to bring that up, not too much, otherwise you'll start to see that it gets some pixelation with our image itself. I'm going to bring one down to the bottom, and again just going to start to tweak that and kind of line everything up. Okay, so it's inside my guidelines. Don't worry about the white bits out on the side. I'm going to hit enter, and because of the quality of the picture that we're using, the initial file, we're not going to see much pixelation there. Command H will get rid of those guides for you, and Command H will bring them back, and that's pretty much our first step, is just getting all that stuff into perspective. The next thing that we need to do is we're going to add a contrast. So we're going to add a hue and saturation adjustment layer. So Command click on our copied layer. So we're going to get this outline for it, and we can see we've got these white areas in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom in, Command D to deselect, and I'm going to use my pen tool here, and I'm just going to come straight across to here. I'm just going to go around the outside of my shape here, and then join it up. I'm going to right click, I'm going to make that a selection, I'm going to make sure I've got no feathering on, and then I'm going to Command Shift I to inverse that selection, so it's going to select everything outside of my shape, and I'm going to hit delete, and it's going to delete that for me, and then Command D is going to deselect that. So as I said before, Command click on our shape, and now we've just got these areas down here, and what we're going to do is we're going to come down here, and we're going to select hue and saturation, or we can come up to layer, new adjustment layer, and again hue and saturation. It's going to ask us if we want to use the previous layer for clipping. Yes, we do. Click on OK, and then what are we going to apply to this layer? So I'm going to double click on our hue and saturation. We've got it all up here, but if you're in CS3, if you double click on that layer, then you're going to be able to see, if I bring that up, you're going to be able to see this little panel, but it'll float somewhere in the middle. So with our hue and saturation, we're going to leave hue at 0. We're going to set the saturation all the way down to -100, and we're going to give the lightness about -50. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is we're going to play around with another adjustment layer. This time it's levels. So head up to layer, new adjustment layer, levels. We're going to use the previous layer as a clipping mask. Click on OK. And we're going to set these to something like 53. I'm just going to keep an eye on how dark it gets. 1 is fine, and then we're going to reduce this down to 226. Okay, that looks pretty good. We're going to add some noise now. Create a new layer. So I can get rid of this panel. We're going to create a new layer, and we're going to select, command click on our grid layer, and we're going to apply some color in here, and then we're going to apply some noise. So we're going to fill that with a color of 808080. Oh, let's make sure we delete the contents there. So a nice gray. Click on OK, and because we've got that selected, when we hit G on the keyboard and we go to our bucket tool, we're going to fill that area, and it's all going to be grey. Head up to filter, we're going to go down to noise, we're going to go to add noise, and we're going to have this set to around about 35, something like that, a little bit too much. Let's try 35.39, something like that. Make sure it's set to uniform. We're going to check monochromatic, and then we're going to click on OK. And then we're going to add some new color. We need to make sure that we set that previous layer to overlay mode. So it's going to overlay that texture onto our little grid there. Next thing we're going to do is add that color. So again, we're going to add a new layer. We've still got our selection of our grid, and we're going to, in that layer, we're going to set it to overlay, and we're going to fill it with a new color. So let's select our new color, and that's going to be 551C08. Let's click on OK. Fill that layer, set it to overlay, and things are starting to take shape, but it's a little bit plain at the minute. So we're going to add some dirt. So we need to click on the link within the file, within the tutorial, sorry, and we're going to get this link to some free vectors provided by Arsenal over at Go Media, and they've got some really great packages you can buy for, you know, really good prices. And we're just going to use some of these. So I'm going to grab my selection tool, I'm going to grab these two here, and I'm going to hit Command C, hit copy, Command C, or you can go to edit and copy. Go back to Photoshop, Command V. It's going to ask you what do you want to paste that new layer in as. For now, we're going to stick it in as a smart object and click on OK. So it's going to take a couple of seconds to load. There it is, really small. So I'm going to just increase the size of that. OK. I'm going to hit Enter, V on the keyboard. I'm going to start to position this there or thereabouts where I want to have these going. I'm just going to build these up, going over to the right, and again coming down from the bottom, and we're going to change the color of them. And once we brought this in from that compilation file from Go Media, I'm going to double click on this smart object. I'm going to get a little message here, just going to click on OK, and it's going to bring up a new tab, and we should be able to find, if we just move over, that we've isolated those two little scratch marks. And then what we can do is we can just grab that shape, come over to our color guides over here, and we can find, you know, make that red. That's a bit pink. Again, that's too dark. That's a bit better. And the same for this one. Then hit Command S to save that. Go back to Photoshop. Oh, let's make sure. There we go. And you can see that it's had an effect and it's changed, excuse me, that layer. And then what we can do is hold down Alt, and we can just start to bring these shapes out, flip them around, and just generally start to make really horrible, like dirty, grungy marks across the top. Don't worry about this area up here, I'm going to clip that off a little bit later. Again, just going to flip that again. Just move that over. Okay, and I'm going to bring one of these down. Again, just holding down Alt is going to create a copy of that layer. Let's flip that vertically. Bring it over, grab a few. Like so. Maybe scale that a little bit. Okay. Then let's grab that whole load. Let's merge them, Command E. Again, Command click on our grid, Command Shift I to inverse our selection. We've still got this layer done. Hit delete, Command deselect, and we've just trimmed that down. And then we can go into our burn and dodge tool, and again we can set our midtones or our highlights, and we can just start to play around with this. Let's increase the size of the brush a bit, bring the exposure down, just build this up. Just around my edges. Let's go in and burn tool. Add some darker areas. Let's bring that layer right underneath. And let's set that to overlay as well. And we can really start to see, if I just zoom in, we're really getting a good effect here of just dirty stains, different highlights just popping out. This area here is quite nice. We've got a nice little breakup. Down here it's all dark and dingy. These nice little grid, little highlights across here. And then up at the top could even look like a bit of blood or something like that. And again, just play around with that technique until you get the final, final image or final kind of finish that you're looking for. And you will find the more that you play around with it, the better you're going to understand all the different tools that are used. I'm just going to bring down the opacity on that layer right down, and then just slowly bring it back. So again, you can just see as if something's dripped down here. The edges are nice and darkened, and I think that looks pretty good. So I'm at about 83%. Just have a look, a couple of percent either way. That looks pretty good. So yeah, about 80% for me. That looks pretty good. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some noise exactly the same way as we did before. I'm going to create a new layer, and we're going to go up to Command click on our grid layer. We're going to go back to that grey color, which was 808080. Click on OK. G on the keyboard to get our bucket tool up. Let's fill that layer. And then we're going to go up to filter. We're going to go to noise, add noise, same amount, that's fine. All the same settings as before, but this time what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to filter and we're going to add a Gaussian blur. So filter, blur, and Gaussian blur. Now, we want to set this to about 1.2, so I'm just going to move it to the side, bring that down, and just start to see how much detail we're losing. 1.6 is okay. I'm going to click on OK, and again we're going to set that layer to overlay as well. And it might make it too dark. We can just bring the opacity down, just lighten up. But all the time, we're just adding just a little bit more dirt, another layer of dirt, and a bit more texture to our final object. Okay, we're going to add a new layer style because it's a little bit dark. So we're going to go up to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and we're going to play around with our levels. So click on OK. And we're going to set that to 0 is fine. We're going to increase this to 1.23. And the last setting we're going to set to 139. Okay, and now it's too light almost, but that's okay. It's just a bit monochromatic at the minute, a bit monochrome. So we're going to play around with some color balance as well. But on this layer, I'm just going to bring the opacity right down, and then just slowly bring up the opacity of that adjustment layer until you get something. I mean, you might be happy with it all the way up here, looking like maybe fresh blood splattering, but I'm just going to decrease that down like so. Then I'm going to go back up to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and this time we're going to go for Color Balance. And again, we're going to set our color balance. We're going to set our midtones to 0, 0, and then -20. And then set the highlights. We're going to set them to -10, 23, and 19. Okay, so adding a bit more color in there. And again, we can bring down the opacity of that layer. Bring it right down. And I'm just going to grab these two layers here, and I'm going to move these underneath as well. And we can start to see that we've got a few more oranges coming in there, and so on. Let's just play around with our opacity a little bit. That's pretty good. Let's grab this one. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. Going to come back down to my grunge layer, my little drips, and again play around with the opacity. That looks pretty good to me. Either looks like something's dripping in, so you could put this on the floor somewhere, play around with perspective, maybe have a puddle of blood coming in or something like that, or something's tried to get in here. That looks pretty good. Okay, we can add more stains. So I'm going to duplicate this layer. Just going to drag it down here. Just going to scale it. Okay, and then you could create these all from scratch, but I'm just going to come around the bottom here. Just delete that, Command deselect. So we've only really got the top layer, and I'm going to start to move these. I'm going to set this layer to multiply. So these are really dark, and again just use them, little highlights down here. I'm going to alt click, bring that down. Like so. Grab my eraser tool and just get rid of these bits. They don't really interest me up here. And now we've got some more drips coming down the bottom. Again, we can Command click on our grid here, Command Shift I, and then still on that new layer, hit delete and we'll lose these bottom bits just to keep everything nice and tidy as that's dripping down. And that's the tutorial. So it's a real quick and easy way to create a really nice grungy effect on this grill here. Do check it out. Do check out how it's been used on the site. over at Soft Factory. Check out all of their work, it's really good. A link to the file that's used in the tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed that. I've been Gavin Steele, taking you through how to create a rusty texture in Photoshop, created by Sergio for psttutsplus.com.